Okay, so what we're going to be covering today, we're starting a brand new chapter. This is chapter 5. I'm only going to be covering a few things from chapter 5 before the final. And the very first thing we're going to be talking about today is an extension over the last lesson that we did that had to do with factoring quadratic functions or parabolas. So on the notes, I give you two quadratic functions. So let's say we have y equals x squared minus 2x minus 8. From last lesson, you took something like this and then you factored it, meaning we put it into factored form. Two numbers that multiply together to get the last term, add together to get the middle term. So two numbers that multiply together to get negative 8, add together to get negative 2 or negative 4 and positive 2. And then I taught you this is called the standard form of a quadratic. This is called the factored form of a quadratic. And we were going to touch upon this. The next chapter is what I told you last chapter. Well, let me explain to you what this is. This is a quadratic, meaning quadratics are parabolas. Every time you have your highest degree is something squared, it's some type of a U shape. And these U shapes, you're going to see them for pretty much the next month, are called parabolas. Or not the next month, let's say for the next 2 weeks, and then the beginning of next semester, we're going to be talking about parabolas really in-depthly. If you were to graph x squared minus 2x minus 8, it would create a parabola. We're not going to be graphing it today. But next class, we will be looking at these a little more in depth. Okay, I'm going to look at the next thing, which was y equals x squared minus 25. And I told you guys this is called a difference of squares. And whenever you have a difference of squares, remember, if the first term is a perfect square and the last term is a perfect square, you can square root it. So y equals the square root of the first term, the square root of the last term. One's a plus and one's a minus. That was factoring a difference of squares. This is called standard form. This is called factored form. Now what we're going to be doing today is going to say solve this. So it's going to give you this function, and it's going to give you many other functions, and it's going to say solve this quadratic equation or solve this quadratic function. And I give you 3 steps how to solve it. So I'm going to go step by step. Let's start off with this one. So on the second thing of example questions, I give you this one again because we're going to start with this. I'm going to go step by step. Step number 1 is set this y equal to 0. Okay? And then factor this, which is what I did a few minutes ago. Two numbers that multiply together to get negative 8. Again, add together to get negative 2 or negative 4 and a positive 2. Or x plus 4 and x plus 2 and x minus 4. You can just flip these. It really doesn't matter. Okay, the new thing is called the zero product property. That's what I have in green on the notes. And with that, what it means is you take every variable and set it equal to 0. So I'm going to pull this variable out, take what it says and set it equal to 0. I'm going to pull this variable out and set it equal to 0. And you'll see why I'm doing this in a second. And then solve for the variable. How do I solve for this? I add 4, I add 4. Basic math. X equals 0 plus 4 is 4. This is one solution. This one, I have minus 2. I minus 2. I'm solving for my x. X equals negative 2. This is my second solution. So what that means is, if I plug a 4 back into here, my original equation, I'll get 0 as an answer. Well, let's look. You don't have to plug it in, but I'm just showing you. If I plug a 4 into here, I'm going to get 0 as an answer. If I plug it into this x, so it would be 4 squared, which is 16. If I plug a 4 into this x, negative 2 times 4 is negative 8, minus that 8, that equals 0. 16 minus negative 8 minus 8 is 0. That's correct, so that works. That's a solution. That means I just solved for this x. And you have one more solution. Let's plug a negative 2 back into here. Let's see if we get 0. We will, by the way, but let's just make sure. If I plug a negative 2 into this x, negative 2 squared is positive 4. If I plug a negative 2 into here, I'm going to get negative 2 times negative 2 is going to be a positive 4 minus 8. Does this equal 0? 8 minus 8 does equal 0. So these are my two solutions. So if you had a question where, let's go back to the very original question, it said y equals x squared minus 2x minus 8. And it says solve for your x. After you set this equal to 0, you're going to have two solutions. And those two solutions are 4 or a negative 2 will work. This or this will work. Okay, I'm going to have you pause the video and try the next one. The next example question that I give you is y equals x squared minus 25. See if you can pause the video and find your solutions. Okay, if you pause the video, you should have done the first step, set this equal to 0. Second step, factor. This is a perfect square, x plus and x minus 5. We just factored this a little bit ago. Now take this x, see how it says plus 5? This whole thing becomes one part. X plus 5 equals 0. And take this, x minus 5 equals 0. Now solve for your x. This is called the zero product property. When you take the x's, or whatever the variables are, set them equal to 0 and solve. So if I minus 5, I get x equals negative 5. That is one solution. Add 5 on this side. This cancels out, and I get x equals positive 5. This is my second solution. So, if I get rid of all this, and the original question was, solve for this quadratic. One of the solutions is negative 5, or I could have a positive 5. These two are the solutions to this. And let's have you try the last one. This was the question. Y equals 2x squared plus 10x. Let's have you solve for this. Pause the video and see if you can factor this and solve. Okay? So if you factored it, first step would be set it equal to 0. Now, this is one of the weird things. It's called a special case, where it's not a difference of squares, and you can't find two numbers that multiply together to get your third term, add together to get your second, because it doesn't work. So what we have to do is we can factor out a 2x evenly from both of these terms. It's called factoring with your greatest common factor, your GCF. 2x times x gives me 2x squared. 2x times positive 5 gives me 10x. So here is this factor. Now, the zero product property, what that says is take every variable. This one becomes one by itself. This one is the other. Take every variable and set it equal to 0 and solve. Okay, if I divide this side by 2, I'm going to get x equals 0. That's one solution. Or minus 5 to get x equals negative 5. So I have 0 as one solution, or negative 5. That's my other solution. And the good thing is, if I went too fast, you can go ahead and rewind this video to see where I might have lost you. Anyways, here are 3 different example questions. these are the solutions for this. These are the solutions for this, and these are the solutions for this. Now look at in the notes, the second or the first green sentence that says, solving using the zero product property shows us where the parabola crosses the x-axis. What the heck does that even mean? Well, what it means is this. If you were to graph this parabola, you don't know this right now, but this parabola is going to look like this. It's going to look something like this. If you were to graph this, here's your parabola right here. If you were to graph this, this is going to cross the x-axis at -5 or +5. It'll cross both of those places. That's what the solutions do. They tell you specifically where it crosses the x-axis. So when you factor it, set it equal to 0 and solve, you're finding the x-intercepts or the solutions. If I were to graph this, my two solutions are going to be 0 on the x-axis or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this is going to look something like this. You don't know this yet, but when we graph these later on, we're going to be graphing these next semester. We're just analyzing them right now, but we're going to actually be graphing them next semester. Your solutions are 0, 0, and -5, 0. If we were to graph this quadratic, our solution would be 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2. -2 or +4, and it's going to look something like this. You don't know that it's going to look like this right now because you haven't been taught how to graph it, but the solutions is where it crosses the x-axis. Now there's 4 different words to find these points. These points are called the roots, the zeros, the x-intercepts, or the solutions. So I would say -5 or 5 is my 0, or my zeros, or my roots, or my x-intercepts, or they're my solution. 4 words to mean the exact same thing. So you can have questions later on down the road where it's asking you that says, find the roots of this, or find the zeros of this, or find the x-intercepts of this, or find the solutions to this. It all means the same thing. Factor it, set it equal to 0, and solve. 0 or -5 here on the x-axis and here, these are called my roots, my zeros, my x-intercepts, or my solutions. Same with 4 or -2. 4 or -2. These are called my roots, my zeros, my x-intercepts, or my solutions. So you can have a question like this, and it's going to say, find the roots of this, or find the zeros of this quadratic, or find the solutions of this quadratic, or find the x-intercepts of this quadratic. 4 different words or ways to ask you to do the exact same thing. Factor it, set it equal to 0, and solve for your x, or whatever the variable is. Okay. These are called finding the solutions, or finding the roots, or solving, or finding the x-intercepts. All right, now we're going to look at a couple more. Now the next one is a little different, and it looks like y equals 2x minus 3 times x plus 1. So look, if I were to multiply this out, which you don't have to, but I'm just showing you, this can be rewritten in standard form. If I were to go 2x times x, I would get 2x squared. 2x times 1 is a positive 2x. -3 times x is negative 3x. -3 times 1 is a -3. And then if I combine these middle terms, I'm going to get 2x squared. -3x plus 2x is -1x minus 3. So look, this is the same as this. This is called standard form, and this is called factored form. Later on down the road, you're going to be learning how to factor something like this, because in this case you can't find two numbers that multiply together to get -3, add together to get -1. It doesn't work. So you can't factor it like before. But we're not going to even do that right now. I'm just showing you. Some people get tripped out when they get quadratics look like this. What they have done is they've already done one of the steps. They've factored it already. So if you have a quadratic already in factor form and it says find the solutions, or find the roots, or find the zeros, or find the x-intercepts, you just go step by step. Set it equal to 0. Factor it. Well, it's already factored, so you don't have to do anything. Now what you got to do is this. Set every variable equal to 0 and solve. Set 2x minus 3 equals 0. Set x plus 1 equal to 0 and solve. Okay, well, let's do this. I'm going to add 3 to get 2x. This cancels out, equals 3. And then divide by 2 to get x equals 3 halves. Or this is also the same as 1.5. So you can leave it as 3 halves, or you can write it as 1.5. That means that one of the zeros, or one of the places where it crosses the x-axis, is at 3.5 or 1.5. Now for this one, x plus 1 equals 0. Subtract 1 to get x equals -1. So my two solutions are -1, or the book likes to leave it as a fraction, 3/2. That means if you were to graph this equation, or the one that I wrote out in blue, the standard form of this, which is the exact same equation, it's going to cross the x-axis. That parabola is going to cross the x-axis at -1 on the x-axis and 3/2 on the x-axis. Okay, why don't you guys try to pause the video for the very last one and see if you can solve it. Okay, the very last one on the notes was y equals 4x squared minus 1. Now the question will be, find the solutions to this quadratic. So I'm going to go a little faster, step by step. First step, set it equal to 0. Second step, factor it. This is a perfect square. This is a perfect square. There's a minus sign. And believe it or not, 1's a perfect square because 1 squared is 1. So this is called the difference of squares. And you can factor this. Take the square root of this term. Take the square root of this term. 1's a plus, 1's a minus. Last step, use the zero product property. That means pull this out, 2x plus 1, and set it equal to 0. Pull this out, 2x minus 1 equals 0. And then solve for your x. Minus 1, minus 1. Just basic math to get 2x equals -1 divided by 2. One of your solutions is -1/2. Second solution, I'm going to add 1. This cancels out. Just basic math, isolating the variable. We're trying to get x all by itself. 0 plus 1, divide both sides by 2. And you're going to get x equals +1/2. So you're going to have a plus or a -1/2. Those are your two solutions. Or these are also called your roots, or your zeros, or your x-intercepts. Okay, for this chapter, we are starting on chapter 5. This is the chapter 5 that we're going to be doing.